What do you think how the things are going to unfold in the future?
We see a figure in the front, let's say Donald Trump, we see Netanyahu, we see MBS in the front, but typically decisions are made in the back in order to...
A nuclear deal reported between Saudi Arabia and USA. But
it has certain kind of agreements which might go into the direction of Abraham Accords, where
nobody knows what is going to happen next. And I think this is the first time that
we have multiple levels of situations. Like we have, for example,
Gulf countries are actually facing the heat of the
highly indebted governments. So seeing that Pakistan is extremely in debt applies to Germany, the US, and France, and Italy. And
common man's life has become really miserable because of this war.
Their benefit is that they have a strong currency.
I don't see any effort by Europe.
You actually do see people going on the streets around the world.
Hello and welcome to JP Global. I am Ayaz Khan, and today we are going to discuss very important issue. Obviously, we are going to discuss Iran war, but today's topic is very different. We are not only going to discuss regional situation, strategic situation, but we are also going to discuss that how this war is impacting the businesses, the markets, and also the households. What is really going on? If we look at the situation, Trump's war against Iran was started that it would, he claimed that it would end within weeks, but it's the fifth month and there is hardly any result. We can see that this war is already expanding from its main fronts to embroil additional countries in the region. How this war will unfold, whether it is going to stop here or we can see it making more trouble for not only for the Middle East or the other countries. To discuss this, and especially its impact on the markets, economy, and household especially, I am joined by a very distinguished guest, Mr. KareemShehadeh-Rifai. Mr. Kareem is a business intelligence analyst and international business development professional who translates geopolitical disruption into political commercial insights. Apart from geopolitical situation, he will explain how the US-Iran war is affecting energy prices, shipping routes, supply chains, inflation, currencies, investment flows, and international trade. So if you are watching this, you will gain a clear understanding of which industries and which region are most affected and exposed, where new risks and opportunities may emerge, and what businesses and investors should prepare next. So welcome, Mr. Kareem.
Thank you.
A lot has happened, and even I must say changed since we discussed that we should do a program on it. As you can see that there was a talk between Donald Trump and Netanyahu in Washington, and afterwards we saw that Saudi Arabia also joined the US war. How do you see this thing happening, and what do you think how the things are going to unfold in the future?
Okay, so the interesting point, like we tend to always think that we see a figure in the front, let's say Donald Trump, we see Netanyahu, we see MBS in the front, but typically the decisions are made in the back, and the decisions are made by multiple interests that coincide in order to move a certain end goal or a certain step forward in a certain agenda, which is there. So in order to understand where we are heading towards, it's very important to understand the agendas which each side has. But to make it a little bit just short on this, it seems from the initial war, Israel and the US started, and their intention is to engage the Middle Eastern countries into a war with each other in order to weaken each country, because the final end goal goes into a direction of greater Israel, because it's which expands, not in the sense that Israel has to be a country expanding to Iraq and partial Saudi Arabia, but in the sense that Israel is the hegemony in the Middle East, and that it has certain kind of agreements which might go into the direction of Abraham Accords, where they have the bigger influence and economic influence, security influence in the region. So that would be, according to some opinions, that would be sufficient for the biblical greater Israel aim, because there is different interests colluding, which would be economic interests, but also religious interests, which come together, and ideological interests. And so they come together into an agenda where which is playing into the current and in the future developments in the region.
Recently, as you can understand, that there was a nuclear deal reported between Saudi Arabia and USA. But suddenly Donald Trump jumped out and said that this deal is not possible before Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords. And if you look at that situation, and now you mentioned that the people behind want this region also jumping in the war, and we have seen that Saudi Arabia has jumped into the war. Do you think that their plans are succeeding in a way?
So that is actually the big question. Are they succeeding with their plans? So what it looks like initially was that they realized that the war in Iran wasn't achieving the results that they were looking for, in the sense that Strait of Hormuz is still controlled, and they're not in a position to gain control over it. Secondly, in regards to the naval blockade which they have on Iran, which is not having that impact regarding the demonstrations inside Iran, which they were strongly hoping to weaken Iran by internal disintegration, or like potentially going in direction of a civil war, which they were trying to arm military groups in, let's say, northern Iraq, among the Kurdish, and among, let's say, Arabs in the west, and let's say in the east also. They're trying to arm certain groups. Anybody who would support disintegrating the country, but that didn't seem really to have the aimed results. And with the big funeral by Khamenei, it showed a certain transnational unification between the different Shia communities mainly, and even among the greater Muslim community, because it had a very strong emotional message which it sent to different communities, which was along the lines of loyalty or treason, I would say. Not in the sense of loyalty or treason towards Khamenei, but towards the greater, you could say, greater good of the Muslim people. I think that was their message. So are they being successful? I would say at the moment it looks like they are not achieving what they wanted to achieve in the time they wanted to achieve it. So right now they're trying to engage, and I would say there's also some false flag attacks probably taking place, which we can't really understand. We can't assess from outside. Everybody will be saying it wasn't me, and will be putting the blame on someone else. But trying to get the GCC countries, likewise Egypt, and I would say Pakistan also involved in this conflict, because these are the militaries which actually have considerable military power. And if they could get them involved with Iran, then they would not need to engage themselves so much, and it would have a very considerable destruction of military powers in the region, which goes in the interest of the Greater Israel Project.
Diminished stockpiles. They are talking about Patriot and THAAD interceptors, and also talking about Tomahawk missiles. So on the one hand, New York Times, Washington Post, and the CNN is talking about that US is, if it continues the war, it is not in favor of United States, it's not in favor of the people. But Donald Trump doesn't seem to be hesitant on that, despite election is there. Midterm election is there. One day he says that, okay, we have completed our strikes. This time, the 13-day strike is over. 1 week strike is over. 1 day strike is over, and then they start striking again. So definitely they have some agenda that if they continue striking Iran, maybe there is uprising, as you were talking about. Maybe there is some conflict. Even if you pick up the New York Times, they are repeatedly reporting that there is a rift between the hardliners and the parliamentarians. So still they hinge hope that some miracle happen and Iran surrenders. So how do you see this?
I mean, typically, always in a war, you're trying to create a rift within your enemy. So this is standard procedure, and also that you will proclaim and say things which aren't true, and that also is general for politics as well. And regarding here, the interesting point is that with the Ukraine war and then with the Gaza war, a great amount um, of military bombs and rockets and missiles, etc., were already used. And so I'm not sure if that was, especially in Gaza. So I'm not sure if that was the intention or if that was within the foresight of the strategy that they would use up their a lot of their material in the war. And the problem is that rebuilding or building them has a long timeline, especially with these are high technology products, but they don't have the mass production aspect behind them. So that's also regarding Europe and Russia. The difference between the equipment that's used is that Russia can produce them much faster than the high tech products produced in Europe. So as this is a war of military resources, like let's say one drone can and one rocket, how many rockets do you need how many Patriots do you need to take down a rocket? It's going to be 4, 5, 6 of them. So you need to produce 4, 5, 6 for one rocket, which might be the cost of 40,000, while each Patriot has a cost, I don't know, 2 million or 300, I think it's 400 or 600,000, something like that. So, and then how much time do you need to produce one rocket in regards to the Patriots? So this is where a lot of the material which is required for a defense strategy against the Iranian rocket strategy, because they don't have air power in the sense that they could fly to wherever the bases are. There's been an Iranian pilot was shot over Qatar, which shows actually that their fighter jets, they do not have this evasive technology to evade air defense so well. So it's really a rocket long distance or short distance and drone war against superior air power from the US. And so I think this is where the situation is going towards who can produce faster in this. And then you, of course, have certain budget limits on both sides. So Iran going in the direction of they having the challenge with exporting their main income source, which would be mainly gas and then oil. And the US will have the economic situation and inflation. And so when prices become more like higher and higher for the local population, you can expect that the population will show it in the next elections in September. And then you will also see that the population will become unhappy, economy will be affected, stocks will fall. So this is right now, everybody is on an edge situation.
So, do you think that since we mentioned the midterm election, Donald Trump's hope will come true that it can end the war that he thought that it will end in the weeks, or that was just a deception that he knew actually what really is going on. The ultimate purpose behind was to involve all the regions, and especially you mentioned Pakistan and Egypt, the most powerful military. But if we look at this situation and we move on to the next part, that is very important. how this is going to unfold for the businesses, for the companies, for the markets, because on the one hand they were okay, it seemed like that they had understood that they could do this from the other side, the Babul Mandip. But Babul Mandip has also been effective. Now they are also worried about that. What possible alternatives do you have in your mind, or the Saudis and the Gulf countries have in their mind, that they can choose to avert this?
So, like, it's a big challenging situation. So you do have mainly the Strait of Hormuz for large volume exports. Of course, you could drive per truck. You could still drive a truck to Turkey, Europe, or whatever you want to do. But a truck is limited to, let's say, 20, 27 tons at max. And so if you were to deliver oil to Europe to sell it, or gas or something like that to China, it wouldn't, and it's not feasible to do it by a truck. By airplane, obviously, also it's much more expensive. So the only way is shipping. So and so in that respect, for the GCC countries, the landlocked ones, let's say Kuwait, Bahrain, they are in that predicament that only have they only have the Hormuz, although Kuwait does have access over the Iraq route to export. But the pipelines haven't really been finished. I think 28, 29, 27, we will be expecting some pipelines to be finished. So you have the east-west pipeline going to Yanbu in the Red Sea, which is being attacked by the Houthis in Yemen. And that has the obvious consequence that Saudi Arabia is making daily, I think it's 500 million daily missing on income. And seeing that oil and gas is the primary income source, and then you have the secondary products, let's say, which would be plastic, Sabic and Tasnia, and these are the major manufacturers, and they export around the world. But as just from the transportation side, it becomes a huge challenge to be able to export. So, for example, in plastics, certain plastics, Saudi Arabia isn't even exporting anymore because they require it for their local industry. Whereas in the past, they would you could still export them, and that is impacting, I would say, on several levels. The Saudi economy, which is the major one in the region. The Emirates has Fujairah. So Emirates left the OPEC, which means that they can produce more, which they need for their economy. So they do have Fujairah, but the problem is it has a weakness, because if it were to be attacked, and you just need to attack certain positions in a port in order to prevent export. So if you were just to, let's say, if you wanted to destroy the storage facilities, the oil storage facilities, and then how long does it take you to rebuild it? It's going to be 8 months, maybe 1 year, 1.5 years. So once they are destroyed, you don't have that capacity anymore for export. And the problem is that once you cannot export your production of oil, gas, or whatever derivatives there are, this affects, I mean, how much are you going to store? Let's say, how much plastic is SABIC going to store before they can export it? Like, because they have to store it and they can't export it at that time. So at what point in time do they stop producing? And let's say, at what point in time do you close an oil well? Because otherwise your whole system will get will break. You have to stop. So then how do you restart those oil wells down the line when you have a peaceful situation? So this whole thing is an integration of different wheels in a system. So when one wheel stops turning, a whole chain of other wheels stop turning also, and they have to stop in consequence. So it's a matter of time, I would say, to have all these consequences. So the longer this whole crisis goes, and if oil prices were to go higher, I mean, at the moment we have decreased, let's say, diesel production globally. because you have a lot of refineries, like you have refineries in the Middle East that have reduced production, in Russia that have reduced production. You have so this has an impact, like until they are rebuilt, and it takes like a year. So you would take you can expect that we will be facing a certain shock time if it continues, right? At the moment, you have an oversupply, let's say, of oil in the market, so we can still we can still manage some time, but you have the strategic reserves have gone considerably low to the minimum levels at some would assess. So at what point in time does the market recognize this situation and then goes into panic? So I think that's something which time is of the essence. And I think that's also playing into the strategy, I would say, whereby Iran would be playing on time, because obviously they are facing the US, which is the superpower in the world. So they can only I wouldn't use the word win, but they would, if you were to use it, you would say they would win with small needle picks, right? So right, and the US is under time pressure because the longer the oil prices stay high, the more it impacts the global economy and its own. And so you would see, let's say, when the oil price went to $140, what was the reaction? Immediately reaction, because that was panic level, $140. So then just recently it went up to 105, and then the OPEC said, we're going to increase production. Then you had before that the Emirates saying, we're leaving the OPEC, and the oil price fell down. So these are measures which are taken in order to convince the market that to bring the oil price down, because that's essential for the global economy. And so my assessment is that if this continues on a long time, you won't have any more of those measures that you can take. And then the oil price just continues going up and up and up, and etc. And at that point in time, we can expect a lot of domino stones going to fall onto each other.
You were right, and same problem. Even Iran is facing the same problem. I mean, production problem and storage problem. So they let's see who blinks first. If we look at the impact that is being realized and that is being felt by the Asian countries, if you look at Japan, Philippines, and if you come to the South Asian countries, they are facing the real brunt, if you like. Even the common man's life has become really miserable because of this war. And but one thing that really causes the problem, that is that nobody is going to stop this war. Nobody has no country does have that capacity to go and tell United States, okay, the enough is enough, let's stop this war, because Donald Trump is not caring about the United Nations. Donald Trump is not caring about any other international law or something. And if we look at the other side, China is watching silently. How would you say about that? What China is doing, and how China is benefiting from this conflict, or what do you say about that?
It's a big challenging situation, I would say, for any decision maker in the world at the moment. How to deal with this situation? It's nothing easy. And so let's say the American side, they have their own local oil and gas production. Then they have a hand on Guyana and Venezuela. So these are two major South American producers. And via Hess, for example, in Guyana, they're controlling the production. In Venezuela, as we've seen. So in that sense, they are secure in the sense of oil and gas supply for their own industry. Europe has North Sea and potentially Nigeria and Libya, as suppliers, but I wouldn't say that's sufficient. Russian supply is falling, and obviously, as Russia is under sanctions, and so for China, I would see their main supplies was coming from the Middle East and coming from Russia. And of course, then you also have South America and USA, but they're not in the situation to be independent like the US is. And from a strategic point of view, they have to manage 1.2 billion people. And that is probably historically also that China has never been like an expanding power because they have sufficient challenges to deal with their own population. Um, it's, I mean, the Chinese strategy goes extremely Sun Tzu. It can be over. It could be a 30-year strategy, which they are calculating. They're calculating every single possibility in advance, and then they make their decisions on how to do their strategy because it's a very calculated approach. So I think their strategy is more let their opponents do their mistakes, don't interfere in the sense like support potentially both sides as long as they are weakening each other, because China could have an interest in Eastern Russia, and could have an interest in further expanding in the Middle East, their influence. They don't want to lose the silk route, that's for sure. And so keeping Iran strong is essential for them. But I'm not sure if they are allied essentially with the Islamic Republic, or if it could also be Pahlavi as the leader of Iran. I think they could probably arrange that with the U.S., that both options stay open. But the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. So I would assume that they would prefer working with the one they already know how they are in comparison to the one they don't know. In their position, and even the whole South and Southeast Asia position, it's extremely challenging because where are you going to get the alternative supply from, except that it's going to become extra expensive because of transportation costs, and then the supply is limited anyway. So I do think they would want the crisis to end as soon as possible. So from the Chinese strategy, and I would say there's probably quite a big team strategizing. Initially, it was to stock up as much as possible. So they do have huge oil storage, like safety storage facilities. I don't forget the number, but it should last them for, I think, 6 months. And so from their perspective, I would say that they're just trying to diversify as much as they can for their oil supply. And other than that, I think they would be focusing on weakening their opponent, which would be the US, especially for the Taiwan expansion, but potentially also for other interests in the world.
Okay. Now, how would you suggest those companies and those investors that in this era of uncertainty, we can see that nobody knows what is going to happen next, and I think this is the first time that Gulf countries are actually facing the heat of the conflict of United States. If you look back into the history, when they attacked Iraq, Gulf countries were quite comfortable. When they attacked Afghanistan, there was no problem at all at that time as well. So, but this is the first time that even not only the Gulf countries, but the whole world is facing this problem. How do you see what is going to happen? Stagflation, inflation, how the small countries like Pakistan are going to brace it. And if you said that if it continues, things could go worse, especially for because if winter is coming and the war is going on, even Europe can face the consequences as well.
Well, certainly. I think it's something that everybody is concerned about and has a huge impact on, I would say, probably every household in the world. And so I mean, we have multiple levels of situations. Like we have, for example, highly indebted governments. So seeing that Pakistan is extremely in debt, but you can apply the same applies to Germany, the U.S., and France, and Italy, and so their benefit is that they have a strong currency which is globally in demand. And the demand for the Pakistani rupee, I think, is globally not so strong. And so currently the U.S. benefits, even though they have a huge debt. Like it's very interesting if you were to compare national debt between countries, you will find that countries, let's say like Turkey, have a lower national debt than the US, or in the percentage-wise to GDP. So I'm not talking about volume, but just percentage to the GDP. But nevertheless, their credit rating of the US and Europe is much better than Turkey, for example. And that's simply because the demand and the demand for their currency, but also for their government bonds is much higher than the demand, let's say, for the Turkish one or other governments, let's say Pakistan. I'm not sure exactly what is the government percentage to GDP debt of Pakistan. So I think what is a situation is that we're all facing a situation of inflation, and I mean everybody around the world has probably experienced it, and the supply shortage in ammonia and products for farming can have, and obviously increased fuel prices will likely have a delayed impact on costs, just basic food costs down the line in a few months. And if it continues in an unstable system of global debt, it might be the reason why countries decide, like one of the interests why they decide to preferably go to war than to in order to revamp their debt system. Historically, that was the case, let's say, with the First World War and the Second World War. When you have an overdebted country, it's a way to restart a system. It doesn't sound very good to me and to anybody, but how do you manage with this situation? So let's say if somebody is in the field of stocks, my personal opinion, even though the stock market has gone up a bit, is to actually is to assess, like, do you go long or do you short it, right? And what do you short exactly? So that would be something to think in that direction. It might be going to, like, if there's a conviction that this will be a long-term crisis, which is very likely, because I'm going to throw in an ideology, Zionist ideology, as a steering ideology behind the war. Maybe because they want to get as much as they can before the midterm elections in the US. They want to get it out of the US government. So get the US government into an extended war with Iran.
So, Mr. Kareem, we have discussed a lot of things, why this war has started and who is behind that. And we have also discussed the different routes of energy as well. And we also discussed that how China is getting impacted, and even the Asian and European countries as well. But despite knowing all these things, I don't see any effort by Europe, any effort by China, any effort by rest of the world raising their voice, going to the United Nations and saying enough is enough. At least I don't see any resolution there for this. I must say that there is no healthy voice standing. There is no even protest anywhere happening that enough is enough. How do you see how the world is? It seems like that they have accepted it.
So you actually do see people going on the streets around the world protesting, and they say is enough and is enough. Interestingly enough, people are being let's say, if you've seen many videos, people protesting in Germany, and then how they are treated by the police, even though according to the German constitution and German law, Germany would not be allowed to contribute towards war crimes. But it did supply weapons for war crimes, and it provided also media support internally in Germany. So, and this applies to many countries have similar things. So the interesting point is, how is it that leadership acts contrary to what the people want? Let's say recent in the U.S., the public support for Trump's policy, he's been falling very strongly, and also the support for the Iran war, and even among soldiers in the US, they don't support this war. Nevertheless, Trump is following through on the war. And that's the interesting point, is like, who's running the countries? Like, what is the power that's running the countries that are doing things which are obviously not in the benefit of the country? And so in this respect, in the US, we know it's the Zionist influence, which doesn't mean Jewish influence. A Zionist is an ideology which mostly is Christian, right? And then the Jewish Zionism and Christian Zionism is a little bit different in their long-term goals. So, but in the US, you can say that Netanyahu gets more applause in the Congress than probably anybody else gets, in spite of committing war crimes in Gaza. And in Germany, I would say it's very, very similar to this. And so it's just a power network, which is controlled by just influential people who have similar interests, and not necessarily interests and loyalty towards their own people. Like corruption, let's say you'll find a lot of corruption in many countries. Let's say in Lebanon, for example, I forget his name, Sassian, something like this, owner of a bank, and the bank withheld the money of the population, but he is sitting at a table with Netanyahu, which discloses certain deeper truths. And so why are countries not doing the best for their people? Is because potentially, and this would be something, it could be like this. I mean, the making decisions is extremely difficult in any leadership role. So it's not easy to make a judgment there. They are tied by financial conditions. In Pakistan, you have the IMF loan. So potentially they don't even have really choices to make, because they're not allowed to make them. Otherwise, the country will go bankrupt, for example, right? So not having freedom of policy could be one of the reasons that countries are just in such a weak situation that they have nothing, they can't do anything else without risking the whole collapse of the country. For example, Egypt, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, Egypt doesn't get any wheat supplies. They don't have sufficient wheat to supply their population. So what happens when you don't have any more bread? And why doesn't Egypt have any more wheat? It was because they stopped producing in Egypt their own wheat, and they've changed the wheat type, and now they have like imported wheat. And so if you have a situation like that, you're not independent anymore. And so I would say it's, I mean, why isn't China doing anything against it? I think they do try. I mean, you did have public speeches where they're saying that the U.S. is controlled by Zionists. China did communicate this clearly, but China is not the kind of country which is aggressive in pushing their policy. They are very, very strategic, and I don't think they still see themselves in a position to be, and I don't think they want to be the global superpower. They just want to maintain the status quo that they have a stability in their country. They can develop technology and become the old China of export, like with the Silk Route.